So, you want to make a hero, a goody-goody two-shoes that will beat the baddie, save the day, and definitely not cause any inter-party conflict from their zero-tolerance policy regarding standing anywhere other than on the high road. Well, there's a subclass for that in D&D 5e. Let's discuss the Oath of Devotion Paladin. Hi there, I'm just a second level fighter who likes talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and if this video or any of the other content on my channel piques your interest, then consider hitting the subscribe button. But enough of that, because today we're covering what may just be the most lawful good subclass for the most lawful good class. Paladins that dedicate their lives to defending the weak and helpless and upholding justice and order at every possible opportunity often take an oath of devotion. For every class in D&D, there is a default subclass that just feeds further into what the class itself provides. This is that subclass for Paladins. It represents the classic image of a heroic holy warrior, but it also represents all the worst attributes. The moral superiority, the annoying sense of self-righteousness, and of course the inability to interact productively with anyone that isn't lawful good. Obviously, you don't need to play into these aspects, but they definitely are there. Apart from that, the Oath of Devotion has a pretty blatant celestial or angelic theme going on. Their features deal radiant damage and help protect or heal allies, and despite them being generic and maybe even a bit bland when compared to other paladin subclasses, they can do something entirely unique, which is awesome. You see, much like the Hexblade Warlock is the only Warlock that can dual wield using Charisma without the Shillelagh cantrip, the Oath of Devotion is the only Paladin that can do that too, provided you find a way to take the Pact of the Blade invocation, but we'll get to that later. So let's cover this holy hack and slasher in some detail. I've also made an example build at the end of the video with a small taste of how much radiant damage it can output with and without using smites. Starting out with the features we get at level 3, the Oath of Devotion has a list of spells that they get at certain levels. We always have them prepared and they don't count against our number of spells we choose to prepare. Now this list isn't terribly impressive, it lacks some of the punch available to other paladin subclasses, but there are some nice additions. I'm not going to go through them all individually, but for standouts we have Aid. This gives a boost in hit points to 3 creatures and raises their maximum hit point value by 5, and it scales when you upcast it. Now the boost isn't terribly significant, but when combined with other options available to you, it fits nicely into the supportive role this subclass can fill. Just remember to revert your hit point maximum once the spell ends. Spells that have a saving throw like Zone of Truth, Guardian of Faith, and Flame Strike are weirdly decent on this subclass because, as we'll see, you're incentivized to have a high charisma score. They might see more mileage from a Devotion Paladin than other subclasses. Beacon of Hope is also great when used in a party that has other members with healing features or spells because it maxes out your rolls for healing, on top of the advantage on Wisdom and Death saves. And Freedom of Movement, of course, can come in clutch during specific situations. Moving on to the meat and potatoes, our other third level feature is Sacred Weapon. This is a channel divinity ability that allows us to imbue a people opener with holy power and is also what makes this subclass entirely unique and somewhat janky. Anyway, whenever you take the attack action, you can spend a use of channel divinity to buff one weapon you're holding. For the next 10 minutes or until you decide for the effect to end, or until you're not holding the weapon, you can add your charisma modifier to attack rolls made with it. This means that throwing it is sadly out of the question. The weapon also sheds 20 feet of bright light and a further 20 feet of dim light. And finally, when you deal damage with it, the weapon can deal its normal damage or pure radiant damage. So, I get the feeling that this was intended to be a small buff to accuracy. However, intentions be damned, because there are ways for us to just use Charisma as our base ability for attack rolls by either using the Shillelagh cantrip or the Pact of the Blade invocation. Applying Sacred Weapon to either of these options lets us double up on Charisma for some really gross accuracy that just isn't seen on other character options in D&D. Due to this level of accuracy, I don't think that picking up a greatsword is the best option, but taking a great axe made through Pact of the Blade and applying Sacred Weapon on top may be the most effective way to play this subclass, and I'm not going to dispute that. But it's not the most unique thing you can do with this feature. You see, you can apply this feature to an offhand weapon and then have your pact weapon or shillelagh in your main hand. Thus, the holy hack and slasher is born. Just a note, this feature doesn't allow you to add your charisma modifier to the damage roll of any weapon it is applied to. So, your offhand attacks won't hit as hard if you don't have good strength or dexterity. Keep that in mind. At 7th level, we get Aura of Devotion, which buffs up our Aura of Protection, so that ourselves and any allies within the aura are immune to the charmed condition. Allies that are already charmed that then subsequently enter the aura have their charmed condition suppressed while they remain in the aura. However, I'm not entirely sure what would happen if you turned on the aura by waking up and an ally was standing next to you with the charmed condition. Would that count as them entering the aura, or would the aura technically be entering their space? I don't know. What do you think? It's a very specific scenario that is open to a bit of interpretation. Our 15th level feature, Smite of Protection, is a pretty strong addition. Whenever we cast the Divine Smite spell, us and any allies within 10 feet gain the benefits of half cover until the start of our next turn. This basically means you get a +2 bonus to your armor class and dexterity saving throws, which is pretty nice. You might not use Divine Smite every turn if you're choosing to dual wield, but the ability to turn it on as a bonus action that also deals a bunch of damage is awesome. Finally, at level 20, we get our Capstone, and this is a big deal for Paladins as they get some of the flashiest high-level features in the game. They're not always super impactful, but they definitely leave an impression, and I like to refer to them as their holy forms. Anyway, the Oath of Devotion gives us Holy Nimbus. This is the culmination of our presence and power as a paragon of justice and lawful goodness. As a bonus action, you enhance your aura of protection for 10 minutes, or until you choose to end it. While enhanced by this feature, you and your allies within your aura have advantage on saving throws against effects caused by fiends or undead creatures. Any enemy that starts their turn in the aura takes radiant damage equal to your charisma modifier plus your proficiency bonus, and there is no save, and your aura is filled with bright light that is also considered sunlight. You can also only use this feature once per long rest unless you spend a 5th level spell slot, and whether or not that trade-off is worth it is up to you. This feature is pretty awesome. It isn't crazy powerful or anything like that, but it is quite obnoxious. The damage ramps up really quickly if you're focusing on pumping your charisma, with it probably being an automatic 11 damage at this point, and if that is the case, you and your allies probably won't fail any saving throws made against evil. The sunlight thing is a bit niche, but hilarious if you're in combat with something that has sunlight sensitivity. Overall, a satisfying capstone ability that fits the theme we have here pretty well. Let's go over a few things to keep in mind as a paladin. Now, the class itself is, in my opinion, the strongest class in the game. Sure, spellcasters and hyper-optimized marshals can delete most problems with inordinate levels of damage, but paladins make it so that there is almost no fear when the inevitable retaliation does come, and on top of that, their damage is pretty respectable. The main reason for this is that the class just scales so damn hard off of charisma. The design intent is that they prioritize strength or dexterity first for weapons and armor, and then consider constitution because they have to be on the front lines due to the fact that their features just don't work with ranged weapons. Charisma may have been intended to be an afterthought, but the 2024 Player's Handbook and Tasha's Cauldron gives us options to just pump it first and foremost, which leads to some gross power. Anyway, Paladins are a D10 class with a respectable level of hit points. They also get access to all types of armor, shields, fighting styles, and weapon masteries. They are heavily pushed towards the martial lifestyle. In terms of spellcasting, they are half-casters. This means that their spell progression caps out at 5th level spells. However, they have a nice array of offensive, defensive, and supportive spells with some roleplay and utility sprinkled throughout. Every pure martial class has a way to scale their damage at certain breakpoints. Paladins get extra attack at level 5 and radiant strikes at level 11. This adds an extra d8 radiant damage on all melee weapon attacks to keep up with the fighters and whatnot. Additionally and uniquely, they get smite spells. These require a bonus action to use now, so rip the supernova lifestyle, but they provide some very bursty damage, especially when you save them for a critical strike. Lastly, paladins are the aura class. Their aura of protection provides a bonus to saving throws in a relatively small area around them. Later on, this aura grows and provides more bonuses. However, it scales with charisma, and having a character project a +5 bonus to saves to every ally within 30 feet is absurd. And honestly, it's one of the strongest abilities in the game if you build for it. On top of that, paladins also get some channel divinity options like clerics, but they aren't hugely impactful and mainly depend on what your subclass provides. Okay, I'm going to shout out a few spells from each level that are worth mentioning when considering the Oath of Devotion. This is not an exhaustive list, and I'm pretty much keeping it to combat capability. There are some awesome utility spells that I won't mention, so don't be afraid to experiment and try out other options. For first level, we obviously have Divine Smite. This is your hardest hitting smite spell and is basically a core feature of the class. It's always prepared, but we can't spam it out anymore because it requires a bonus action to cast now. The damage is overtaken by banishing smite later on, but even then it comes out on top against fiends or undead creatures. Divine Smite does not have any utility whatsoever, but popping it when you hit with a crit is one hell of a rush. Divine Favor is another awesome first level option, particularly if you're leaning into the dual wielding playstyle. This adds a small d4 radiant damage to every attack and is a concentration spell. However, stacking dice on every attack starts becoming noticeable after a few turns of hacking and slashing. Then Prayer of Healing is a great second level option, particularly if you have any party members that regain uses for features or even spell slots on short rests, as it allows you to gain the benefits of one at the low cost of 10 minutes of casting. It also provides some much appreciated healing. Crusader's Mantle is essentially an area of effect version of Divine Favor and can turn a group of peasants or woodland critters into a genuine problem, while Spirit Shroud is a direct replacement for Divine Favor and adds a d8 extra damage on all attacks. It will also scale to 2d8 when cast with a 5th level spell slot. It does come out of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything though. Banishment is worth a mention for a Devotion Paladin if you're pumping up your charisma, as it will be just as effective as a true caster's. However, it does come online very late, but that's probably when it's at its most useful. Finally, Banishing Smite does very slightly more damage than Divine Smite on most targets and can banish a target if you reduce their hit points low enough. This may never happen, however, but it's reasonably funny when it does. As for feats, we have a few awesome options for our Devotion Paladin. Eldritch Adept is unironically broken on a Paladin if you choose the Pact of the Blade invocation. Thanks to the 2024 PHB, this invocation allows your weapon to deal radiant damage if you like, but most importantly, it lets you use charisma for attack and damage rolls with it. No matter what playstyle you go for, getting an Angel Blade is one of the best ways to optimize for this subclass. It should be noted that this feat does require the spellcasting feature, but we now get that at level 1, which is a bit of foreshadowing. Then Dual Wield is what I view as the most fun way of building this subclass. It lets you make an offhand attack as a bonus action, completely separate from your offhand attack made with the light weapon property and Nick Mastery. It does compete with smites, but you can't smite forever, and paladins do actually make some of the best dual wielders. Also, as mentioned, Devotion Paladins can dual wield using Charisma without taking both Pact of the Blade and Shillelagh, so why not? Taking Great Weapon Master is probably the more optimal play here, and combining it with Polearm Master just makes sense for the guaranteed bonus action attack. Your accuracy will be crazy, but this seems less fun in my opinion. Mounted Combatant is worth a mention because Paladins get the Fine Steed spell. You can keep your pretty Celestial Pony safe and dunk on medium-sized creatures while doing so. For more defensive options, we have Resilient. We're specifically looking at picking up proficiency with Constitution saves here. There really isn't another class that can pump up their concentration checks to the same degree as Paladins. Then Inspiring Leader is a great charisma-based option. If you're leaning into the Shining Hero theme, then we have to assume you're taking control of the party and becoming the leader. Giving out long, drawn-out speeches now gives out a lot of temporary hit points too. Heavy Armor Master is another great option to be a wall and keep yourself chugging along. Most paladins will also have enough strength to equip plate armor as well. For origin feats, you can't go wrong with Tough for more hit points. Musician is also a great option here if you want to lean into the cheesy hero shtick and support your party more. But obviously, Magic Initiate can give you Shillelagh or some dependable range damage dealing options, or both. Right, for species, you can always take whatever fits your character concept best, but I am going to make two recommendations. I'm going to be completely honest. Taking the custom lineage from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything feels a bit filthy. If you are in a game where the option is available, then I highly suggest you go for it. This species option gives you a free feat at level 1, and that might sound similar to the human from the 2024 PHB, but it isn't limited to origin feats. Now granted, most feats are locked to level 4, but a very specific one is not. The limiting factor here back in the day was that you only increased a single ability score by 2, but with our current PHB that doesn't apply, and your ability score increases are determined by your background. So yeah, you take the option to get access to the Eldritch Adept feat, and then you pick up the Pact of the Blade invocation at character creation, which paladins can actually do now. You've just teched into the full Charisma Paladin lifestyle. Enjoy being called broken and overpowered. You will also get either Dark Vision or a skill proficiency of your choice, so that's nice. As an alternative, you can just go full Celestial and choose Aasimar as your species. They are pretty strong and get resistance to necrotic and radiant damage, Dark Vision, the Light Cantrip, and an extra miniature lay on hands. Most comically, however, is their Celestial Revelation feature that lets them show off their angelic power. One option gives you wings, one option is spooky and gives you fake wings, and one option burns you and every creature in a small area with holy fire. This hilariously brings the unavoidable damage you deal at level 20 with Holy Nimbus to 18 points of radiant damage every round, assuming you built for Charisma. Aasimar are amazing if you don't plan on bum rushing the Charisma build, however. If you're not going to make it to the holy form you get at 20th level and you want to dive into the world of multiclassing, here are a few decent options. Once again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So, 2 or more levels of fighter gives you the almighty action surge, which lets you take an extra attack action, which is pretty nasty on a paladin with spells that add more dice and the radiant strikes feature. If you want to go further up to a subclass, then consider the champion for an increased critical range for more frequent smite crits. There is a lot of overlap here, but action surge is worth it. Warlocks and paladins are a classic combination, but nowadays you don't need to be a hexadin. You can be a warladin or palalock, because all warlocks can take Pact of the Blade. However, Eldritch Blast is also the best ranged option for a paladin to get access to. If you want to relive the glory days, then take at least 5 levels and pick up the Eldritch Smite invocation for some non-bonus action smite shenanigans that can 100% be combined with regular smites. Finally, taking 6 levels of Valabard gives you a ridiculous feature that lets you replace an attack with a cantrip, which in this case can be True Strike for some more radiant damage. Some more spellcasting is also a nice addition. However, taking this in combination with the 2 previously mentioned multiclassing options can lead to an apocalyptic turn of burst damage. Alright, time to actually build ourselves one of these holy hack and slashes. I just want to mention that this is not the most optimal build and is just my take on leaning into the cool thing that this subclass can achieve. Dual wielding is way better than it used to be, and I really enjoy leaning into it when a class and subclass combo throws us a bone. Anyway, at first level we are obviously picking up the Paladin class and choosing the custom lineage from Tasha's Cauldron. We're taking the Eldritch Adept feat and choosing the Pact of the Blade invocation so that we can immediately use our charisma for attack and damage rolls. Using point buy, we'll set our charisma to 15, our strength to 14, and our constitution to 13. The other 3 ability scores don't matter too much and are up to your personal preference. As for our background, we're going custom to get a combination of a +2 to charisma, a +1 to constitution, and the tough origin feat. I will also mention that you can take the Magic Initiate feat here and pick up Shillelagh for the most optimal damage potential, but you will have to sacrifice a bonus action on the first turn of every combat to get it going, and I just don't want to pay that kind of tax. For skills, let your heart guide you. I'd pick up the hero type options like Athletics, Persuasion, and Religion, but go with whatever tickles your self-righteous pickle. Now, at this point, you can use whatever weapon you like with your Pact of the Blade. Later on, we will start using scimitars to dual wield. As we progress through the levels, we will pick up the 2-weapon fighting style for more damage, and of course the Nick Mastery. At 4th level, we're taking Inspiring Leader to set our charisma to 18. We'll be dishing out a fair few self-aggrandizing speeches and a significant amount of temporary hit points from now on. At 8th level, we're taking Dual Wielder and pumping our strength up to 15. We can now wear the heaviest of heavy armor, and on turns where we don't smite, we can still utilize our bonus action for some decent damage. Obviously, if you want to go the big 2-hander route here, then just replace this with Great Weapon Master and use a Great Axe. At 12th level, we take an ability score increase to max out our charisma to 20. Our saves will be juiced at this point thanks to Aura of Protection. Level 16 is our last traditional feat, and I'm opting for another ASI here, this time to Constitution, bringing it up to a respectable 16. As for our epic boon at level 19, I can't help myself. We're taking the boon of recovery because it pairs ridiculously well with lay on hands. If we go down, we instead drop to 1 hit point and then heal for half our maximum. When our turn comes round again, we can dump lay on hands or the heal from this feat onto ourselves at the low cost of a bonus action and pretty much guarantee a near full heal. It's really gross. Finally, let's talk about some of the radiant damage potential we have here. It's all arbitrary white room damage for interest's sake that doesn't take accuracy into account. None of this matters, and your experience in an actual game is gonna vary wildly. Anyway, we'll be using scimitars exclusively because juggling isn't an option here, and we'll assume we don't get any crits, and of course we'll just use our bonus action to make another attack. We're doing it this way because I'm also going to show you the average damage of a smite crit, and you'll see how it dwarfs the rest of the damage. So basically, if we get a crit in our attack action, we immediately sacrifice our bonus action to smite. I've also taken into account any other extra dice we would get from that specific attack. So, at 5th level, we unlock extra attack and pop on a Divine Favor, and our 3 attacks net us 28 damage overall. I will just mention for this point, we don't yet have Dual Wielder and can just pop out a Divine Smite, but I'm going to keep to the same rules as the rest for consistency. 8th level is when we reach our 4 attacks per turn peak and we rock out 38 damage. 11th level is a reasonable spike for us as we now have Radiant Strikes and we're casting Spirit Shroud instead of Divine Favor and we end up with 46 damage in a turn. Finally, at 20th level, we can upcast Spirit Shroud to deal 2d8 damage per hit, and our Charisma is maxed out. We deal a very modest 67 damage in a turn without crits. Now, let's get to the sad part of things. If we do happen to score a critical hit, then our smites almost double our damage output at every single point we're looking at here. I've also pointed out the damage we would deal against a fiend or undead in orange. At 5th and 8th level, we do 24 extra damage from a Divine Smite cast at 2nd level, or 33 damage against our chosen foe. Notably here, we don't have to replace an attack to do this at 5th level, but this doesn't reflect the damage you would deal with a non-crit smite. From 8th level onwards, however, you will need to replace one of the first 3 attacks, and sadly not the smaller number, because using Dual Wielder we can make 3 attacks with our packed weapon, one of which is made using a bonus action, and a single attack with our actual offhand sacred weapon. 11th level sees us put down a 3rd level spell slot for 44 or 53 damage on a smite crit. Finally, at 20th level, we will be using our final 5th level spell slot on banishing smite on any target that isn't a fiend or undead, as it does more damage. 67.5 on average in this case. Against our chosen foe, Divine Smite reaches its final form in the hands of a paladin and deals a massive 75.5 damage, dwarfing our actual damage with weapon attacks by a fair margin. So yeah, if you do crit, just smite and roll buckets of dice. Obviously, I am aware that using smite instead of dual wielder does better damage, but that burns through your spell slots, and saving them up for crits is more exciting, in my opinion. Alright, that was the Oath of Devotion Paladin, the goodest of good boys. I think the idea of holding a shard of celestial light in one hand and an actual glowing people opener in the other is pretty awesome. Anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, then you're a legend, and I really appreciate you. Would you run one of these as a holy hack and slasher, or a Zweihander monster with god tier accuracy? Or would you stick to strength or dexterity and forego the pretty blatant cheese we've stumbled upon here? But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Cheers.